presentation today is called, the title is Quality Media and Intentional Consumption, How Our Media Choices Create a More Positive World. It might take me a moment before I get all of my technology set up here appropriately. So I'm really endlessly fascinated by the role that media plays in our lives. And that fascination grows with every new device or digital special effect or compelling AI video that I watch. But I'm also a human, right? I'm a human living in 2023. And it's difficult to be a human in 2023 and not notice the deep and divisive problems in our world. I'm interested in how one affects the other. If media affects my understanding and awareness of the world around me, how can I use it to positively influence my thinking and behavior? If you believe, as I do, that media has the ability to influence polarization and divisiveness, if it has the power to influence the world negatively, then it must also have the power to increase understanding and influence the world positively. So that's what I really want to explore in my research and discuss with you today. You already heard lots of introductions about me and the work that I do. I'll just add a little bit saying that I've been interested and concerned about this question in one way or another for a very long time. I was a television producer for many years. Before I came to academia, I was concerned about it then. And now, as I'm in academia, I have an opportunity to explore the issue with my students and with colleagues and through more formal research. And I'm happy to talk about any of the things that are on that screen another time and follow up with anyone who would want to, but just gives you a little bit of an idea about the things I've been involved in and some of the research that I've published. And you got a sense of some of the work that I've been doing. I do focus most of my work in media literacy and media for children. We just started a certificate in children's media at my university, and so that's really giving us an opportunity to grow that. And these are some of the companies and organizations that I've worked with. But I do like to hang out with kids. So I try to take any opportunity to really have conversations with young people about the media that they enjoy using and consuming. And that led me to start a podcast a few years ago that's called Kids Talk Media, where I interview a child and their best friend, and we talk about the media that they like. And I try to do that in a non-judgmental way so that they will share things with me. You can access the podcast anywhere in the world, so hopefully you'll take a look at that. And then my media literacy work also has been going on because I'm old now. It's been going on for a long time. So Media Inside Out is a television series that I do for my university, but it is streamable, of course, and so you can access that. And I've been involved in with these other organizations. So what I can say to you is that I've been thinking about media literacy and its influence on us as consumers of media at a local level, at a national level, and at an international level. And so there are things you can do in a classroom, in your school, in your city, and then things that I am more concerned with as far as what's happening in the United States, and then things happening globally. So I want to put forth an argument for today. If we developed stronger media and information literacy skills, if we made more conscious choices about the media we consumed and why we were choosing to consume it, we would make choices that better served our needs, our health, our mental and physical health, and our community's needs and their health. So I'm calling this media literacy skill intentional consumption. So the argument is that using intentional consumption will help us to make choices that can have a positive world effect. I started thinking about this notion of quality media. What does quality media really mean? Several years ago, when I was noticing, as I'm sure you have as well, that the media content that audiences are consuming is predominantly negative, right? The violence, the imagery is repetitive. The changes in the monetization strategy, so the changes in the ways that media companies make money, has changed the choices that they make as far as what to produce. So there are changes to who gets to make media and who gets to share it. Sometimes that's wonderful, right? I can share media, you can share media. But from the larger media companies that have a great deal of influence, there are some choices that have been made that have been not the best for the audiences. That massive growth of social media influencers and how those value messages that we see on the screen from all these sources impact the choices that we make outside of the screen. So I'm really interested in that transition from what we watch on screen to what we see out of the screen in our real lives. How do our choices as an audience impact the way we live our lives when we're not engaged with media, which frankly is almost never, which means the influence is even stronger. The discussion about quality media is important to all audiences, all ages, but my research has mainly focused on children and youth. While the information and findings that I'm going to show you today focus quite a bit on children, I think you're going to see that the insights and the findings correlate to adults as well. So first I want to tell you about a project that I did this past year in the last few months, where I started asking colleagues, this was like a beginning to the quality discussion, where I started asking colleagues and parents and friends around the world to share with me the names of a few of the most popular children's television programs in their country. So initially, I sought feedback from the UNESCO Global MIL Alliance. I served as vice chair for several years, and I engaged many of my alliance members in this conversation, and then broadened that out. This past year, I conducted research as a Fulbright Global Scholar. I was able to include new information from my hosts in Brazil and the UK and Australia, and I spoke with several media literacy leaders in the United States as well. The feedback that I got was informal, it was anecdotal, right? I wasn't requiring formal research data or published reports. I wanted to know, what were their kids watching? What were their friends' kids watching? What were their relatives watching, their nieces and nephews? Of course, we know that children are spending much of their screen time on YouTube and TikTok. But even on those platforms, children are often watching television programs or segments of television programs or memes about segments of television programs. And an example is Squid Game. Try to say that 3 times. Squid Game was a show on Netflix, still is a show on Netflix. It's a show for adults. If you haven't seen it, it's pretty scary. It's a very disturbing film. It's people fighting to the death, right? And many parents decided that the show was not something that their children should watch. And kudos to them. But children still learned about it and wanted to watch it. How? TikTok. TikTok had thousands of posts and songs and memes uploaded that children were finding in their normal flow of looking at things on TikTok. And a lot of what was posted was funny. And there was merchandise that was offered with Squid Game, you know, the name of the show and some little iconic visuals from the show on the merchandise. So kids got engaged with it, not because they were watching the show on Netflix, but because they were engaged with it on TikTok and were being offered merchandise. And that also, those merchandise offers happened in the mall, in stores that they were in when they were hanging out in real life, as well as what they saw online. So they got engaged with the show before they ever knew that it was not appropriate for them, and then of course wanted to watch it. And of course it was on Netflix, so if you have access to Netflix, you have access to Squid Game. So thinking about what leads us to consuming, making choices about what is quality, right? That's the overarching point here. So I watched at least a few minutes of every show that was suggested to me, and I'm going to go through those per country and show you what some of those shows were. And as I screened the programs, I considered these questions. You might be surprised how much you can tell, even if you can't understand the language. So there's a lot of nonverbal things that you can get from these shows, but oftentimes there were captions available. Sometimes there were versions of the shows available with an English subtitle on YouTube. So I was able to actually watch a number of them. The questions that are here, though, are questions that are often discussed and researched when evaluating media content. So I was looking to evaluate consistently repeated value messages. And all of these questions get at those value messages, right? When we're looking at the screen, who has voice? Who's actually speaking? Who has power in that scene? Who do we see? Who do we not see? What are the the norms of childhood that are conveyed. So where do children eat their lunch? What does the classroom look like? Do they have scenes where they're with parents or not with parents? How is parenting conveyed? Do parents and kids spend time together, or are the scenes basically a parent saying one thing, child goes off? What's the gender, racial, and ethnic balance? What are the superheroes saving us from? Different parts of the world, different people. What do those people look like? What are the indicators that we see of nationalism? So when I'm watching content that came from the United States, what are indicators that it is taking place in the United States? Is there a flag in the scene? Are they talking about going to New York or going to Los Angeles? Are they talking about food that people are talking about, hot dogs or fried chicken, things that people eat frequently in the United States? Likewise, is that happening in the content in other countries? Indicators of consumerism, are the characters often talking about a brand name that they're wearing or something they have to buy? Are they going to, oh, I have to go to the party Friday night, better go buy a new outfit? Or are they saying, I have to go to the party Friday night, I wonder what's in my closet? Big different messaging about the values of that country. Are there representations of nostalgia, right, of what it was like in the olden days? How do they treat violence, and how graphic is that violence? What are the values regarding religion, and how is that seen? And we could really go on and on. There are lots of value messages contained in media. So I'm going to really very quickly go through the slides that were that show a couple of the shows for each country. So I'm not going to spend time talking about those shows individually. Some of them you'll recognize, some of them you may not. Some of them, like this is the screen for the United States, you might look at it and say, oh, well, we watched that in my country as well. And that's probably true, because something like Bluey is now all over the world and Coco Melon is on YouTube. And so that I have it up here, but let me actually pause and say the shows that I am highlighting for you, the specific request to the people that I spoke with was, what's on television? What are people watching on television? So you'll notice as we go through that there really is it's not a focus on the influencers that people are watching on TikTok or on YouTube, only if there's something that also appeared on television, and Coco Melon does appear on television. And remember, this is research that was focusing on children. So these are all the shows that their kids like, their kids' parents, the parents of their friends like, right? Things like that. We're going through these different countries. Let me try to move this out of the way here, right? These are some from Brazil. And even as you visually look at some of these, like here's Mexico, and two of the shows are from Nickelodeon. You can see the balance between things that are animated and live action. So the Club de Cuervos is live action, but very few of the things here are live action. And there are lots of reasons why that is true, especially for children's content. It's a lot easier, right? When you want to feature children in something, children who are 6 or 7 or 8 years old are going to grow up very quickly. And if you want the show to be on for years, there's no way they're going to look the same. So animation is a way to work around that. Some countries really have a mix of animation and live action, and some really favor more live action. Here's some from Armenia, from Israel, from China, Morocco. Morocco had a couple of really interesting shows that are reality TV, where there are many more adults in the show that are talking to children, but the children do not have as much agency as in some of the other shows that we see. Lots of anthropomorphized animals talking and things like that across the world. And so you can see how sometimes you can actually tell a lot of what's going on, even though I didn't speak the language. And a few from Australia. And of course, Bluey is from Australia. And then I wanted to just pause for a moment. So these are YouTubers. These are kids that are on YouTube. So in addition to the shows that I just went through that were all television focused, in this case, these are the kids that kids are watching when they are watching YouTube. So of course, kids are watching adults also, right? But when they're watching kids, these are the kids that they most often are watching. And some of these are they would be in the top 5 of YouTubers in the world, adults or kids. So like Nastia, who's the one on the top left, and then Ryan Koji, Ryan's World, who's the third one in. Those two are two of the top YouTubers of any kind, adults, children, anything. So just to give you a sense of like how much influence those kids command. So I just want to flag a few of those children. So what are some of the persistent value messages that I saw in the content that I looked at? I am what I buy was a really big one across the world. So not maybe in every country, but in many countries. I am what I buy, meaning, right, my representation of my value in the world is from the sneakers that I have on, and whether they're brand name or what's something I have in my hair or something. Learning how to make a smart purchase is an important skill. This is something that there's messaging like this for adults all the time, but kids get this message also. You're never too young to learn to look pretty or handsome. Life is about play. So very few shows that focus where the characters really say anything that has to do with homework, school, studying, having a job, having to work hard at a job. That's not part of the conversation. It's all about play. A positive theme really is that families can have fun playing together. Play is best with a toy, with a thing, as opposed to imagination. Being recognized by strangers and fans and celebrities is fun, and being well known has lots of benefits. And that's true whether you're watching YouTube and TikTok or you're just watching regular television programs. That is in there. You can think about Squid Game, for those of you who've seen Squid Game, just the whole notion, it was an opportunity to be on TV, fight to the death to win a large amount of money. But this idea that it's worth letting everybody see you while you do that is really a persistent value message in many, many countries. Also, that voicing your opinion is good, that it's good to say how you feel. It's good to be critical, right? Voicing your opinion critically is good. That comes from watching all of those reality television shows, that we begin to get this value message that if I have something to say about the way you look or the way you act, and I don't think it's particularly good, or I have an opinion about it, I'm going to say it. The internet is the best place for advice about everything. Next bullet, you can make a lot of money as a YouTuber, and making a lot of money is important. That's a very recurring message. And actors pretend, but YouTubers are real. That really came out of the podcast. That was something that came up frequently in the podcast. And we would talk about a number of these shows that I just went through. So kids often feel that when they watch something that's a narrative program, those are actors, they know they're actors, and they know that they have scripts and that they're reading lines. But they feel that when they watch YouTubers or TikTokers, those people are real, right? So they're not thinking about the fact that they may have drafted a script, or they may have recorded it many times. There may be people coaching them about what sounds good or what doesn't, or what's popular. They're thinking about what received a lot of likes and things in previous weeks. So all of that is influencing what they say also. And then there are persistent value messages that are about media. So these are messages about media that they are learning from watching media, right? A little bit confusing there. So when kids, and adults too, are watching television, watching shows, watching things on TikTok, watching things on YouTube, one of the things that you learn frequently is this message of it's fun to use media, you should be on social media, and popular kids are on social media. So there is a lot of peer pressure. Even if you're not on social media, there's a great deal of peer pressure to be on social media. Also, that you should have your own YouTube channel. I mean, I talk to kids frequently who are quite young, and I've talked to kids in different parts of the world who feel that having a YouTube channel is something they aspire to. Making content as if they have a YouTube channel is something they like to do in their play. Being famous is fun. I mentioned that before. Being famous has perks. They'll learn that the best way to pose for a selfie. They learn how to share videos and photos online. So to be clear, it's not that they're watching a show that says to them, I'm going to teach you how to pose for a selfie. I'm talking about narrative, fictional entertainment shows. So it's just a scene. And in that scene, a character says to another character, let's take a selfie. And they take their phones out and they take a selfie. That's what I mean by the persistent value messages. They're learning how to compete in a video game, that you can get addicted to social media. You can learn stuff your parents don't want you to know by searching the internet, and that it's difficult to turn away from the internet, turn away from your devices, or to turn off your device, like emotionally difficult. So even people that I talk to who are too young to necessarily be addicted, or I know they're not, I can tell by the way they're talking, they're not addicted to media. They know that that's a concern. Kids worry about that, adults worry about that. So taking all of that information together, this is a synthesized list of what I consider those quality media themes. So quality media includes what? Quality media does what? So quality media reflects an appreciation for diversity in all aspects of life. Quality media encourages curiosity and an open learning mind. Quality media conveys empathy for others. Quality media reflects that challenges happen, but perseverance and resilience lead to solutions. Quality media engages our senses emotionally, cognitively, socially, and age appropriately. Quality media supports authentic recognition of cultural identity. Quality media resonates with the lived experiences of the audience. Quality media integrates health and wellness concerns. Quality media welcomes critical thinking about content, encouraging media literacy. And quality media offers a hopeful ethos reflected through empowered role models. So it's media that speaks to who we are, speaks to the communities and the cultures and the countries that we live in. And while it may introduce us to themes that are upsetting and make us angry or frustrated, so it's okay to have all of this, mix of emotions, but that the goal at the end for quality media is that it offers a hopeful ethos. So it's not leaving you feeling, oh my God, the world is an awful place and I don't know what to do about it and I'm just depressed, but rather there are awful things happening, but either I or the people around me, or there are ways to aim for things to be better. So a hopeful ethos. So now I'm thinking about how those themes of quality media are reflected in the development of MIL skills, media information literacy skills. So I want to talk about the definition of media literacy and address the media literacy, media and information literacy differences for a moment. This is the definition of media literacy through the National Association for Media Literacy Education. It is the definition that I rely on. It's the ability to access, analyze, evaluate, create, and act using all forms of communication. Now note that it says media literacy on this screen, and yet in my prior screen, I said media and information literacy. It is one of the challenges in the global conversations about MIL. I'm just going to refer to MIL as media and information literacy, which is that within the United States, most often the word that is used is media literacy. Outside of the United States, the term that is most often used is media and information literacy. If you would talk to people within the United States, they would probably tell you that the people that are working in media literacy consider information literacy part of that. And the people that are doing information literacy, more on the library side, also consider that media literacy is part of that. So there's still this definitional connection, but the terms are different. But outside of the country, outside of the US, you'll hear MIL more often. So that's the definition that I'm thinking of when I'm talking with you about media literacy or MIL. And I'm also thinking about all these forms of media. So I'm not just thinking about television when I talk about media literacy, even though that's what some of that research was that I showed you. I'm really thinking more broadly about all the methods of media, including books. So digital media, but also non-digital media. And for years, I have relied on, for decades really, I have relied on the 5 key questions, right? Discussions about media literacy among media literacy educators have often been led by these 5 key questions of media literacy that were developed decades ago. And I really felt for a long time that these 5 questions were the most effective way to begin a dialogue about media literacy. I've used these 5 questions with children as young as 5 and adults as old as 85. But lately, I've been feeling that they don't quite address what it means to be a media literate person in the 21st century. They don't get the quality piece in there, or issues arising from an overwhelming use of, let's say, social media, or our growing use of AI or artificial intelligence, right? And that disconnect between the 5 key questions and the way all of the ways in which media is coming at us today, I've experienced this disconnect between those feelings in a general education, gen ed, media literacy course that I teach for Temple University. The class is made up of students from a wide range of majors and departments. And last week we talked about news literacy. That was one of our topics. And specifically, we talked about fact checking and verification, finding trustworthy news sources, a whole range of issues important to media literacy, or MIL. During our discussion, I asked students to add a word to a word cloud with their responses to the question, how does the news make you feel? And these were their replies. So you're probably familiar with the way word clouds work, right? That the words that are bigger are words that more than one person put in, and the words that were put in less often are smaller. But you can get a sense from looking at all the different words. So the ones that are largest: disappointed, skeptical, anxious, informed, concerned, angry, aware, and then look beyond that: indifferent, it's complicated, safe question mark, they're upset, endangered, depressed, entertained. So really a wide range, but the ones that are in the center are having issues. They know they should be informed. They know they should read or watch the news, but it makes them feel awful. And just doing this word cloud led us to a discussion about that. They definitely do not feel that they are having a quality news experience. So they disengage, either for a day or a week or completely. And that's a problem. I also talk to children on my podcast. I've mentioned Kids Talk Media. Each episode is a conversation with a child between the ages of 5 and 14 and their best friend, and they talk about whatever aspect of media they choose. But almost always, the conversation veers into concerns. Their concerns, not mine, not their parents, but their own. Concerns about privacy when they're using Siri or Alexa or any personal digital assistant. And these are young children, right? They're concerned about stranger danger, cyberbullying, whether to trust the influencers that they watch on TikTok, how they're tracked online, and more. Even at this young age, they're aware of the influence of media, but totally unsure about what to do about it. And I know I've just to emphasize, even though I'm talking to children who are 5 to 14, it's not just the 12 and 13 and 14-year-olds who are concerned. Frequently, if not like almost every time, young people that I talk to who are 7, 8 years old are bringing these topics up. So I feel a transition is needed. We need meaningful media literacy questions to help us navigate this quality question and help us make better choices for our media use. So here's my new list, right? And I'm calling it Sherri's 10 Most Meaningful Questions of Media Literacy. Here are the questions. Some of them you're going to recognize from the basic 5 questions. Who created this media? Why was this media created? Who is benefiting from or making money from this media? That's a new one. Who controls this media? Is it me? Is it a big corporation? Is it a small group? How is risk and opportunity balanced for me with this media? Does this media enable me to participate in a community important to me? Do I have the skills and maturity to competently analyze, understand, analyze, and evaluate this media? Does this media help me understand others with tolerance and understanding? Or is it just inflaming? Do I feel more informed about myself and others after consuming this media? Is this media improving my well-being? I have to say that there are themes in here that come up in conversations frequently for me, with students, with colleagues, with friends, with children I interview across the board. And several are not in the initial 5 questions. The list goes beyond simply asking about creative intention. Who created this message? What creative techniques were used? That's where the original questions. Going into questions that look at how the audience is affected, how we feel about the media. And I think this is a big eye-opening moment that came about through COVID and our complete reliance on the online space, and recognizing in that moment the influence on our well-being. So the words I've highlighted in red are the ones that I think are new concepts that need to be in. So who benefits, who controls, balance. So recognizing that, you know, I as an example of balancing risk and opportunity is that when I go on a new social media site and I need to make an account, I know there are terms and conditions they want me to read and check. And I never read terms and conditions. I'll bet you never read the terms and conditions because they're just daunting to read. So I take a risk by not reading it because of the opportunity to be on social media. I feel the risk is okay because everyone else I know is on that social media site. So I click it and move on. I'm not saying it's always a good decision, but right, that's what I mean by risk and opportunity. Maturity is thinking about your own maturity, your own ability to consider the media that you consume and how it makes you feel. So this notion of how it makes you feel to me is key. I want to tell you about a moment where that really came home to me. A few years ago, I had a conversation with a group of 9-year-old girls who had just gone to the movies to see The Hunger Games. So in the US, the movie was rated PG-13. So in PG-13, parents are strongly cautioned against allowing their children to see PG-13 movies. You may, depending on where you are in the world, you may have something, it may not be called PG-13, sometimes 12 is the age, but in many countries there is a rating that's somewhere in that 12 or 13 range, that it's going to be a little more violent, a little more adult themed, and parental guidance is suggested. And for those of you who are not familiar with The Hunger Games, right, this is a very dystopian story where kids, really teenagers, are fighting to the death in horrific situations. And it was a series of best-selling books and made into a series of movies. So I'm having this conversation with a group of 9-year-old girls. And so I asked them, did you know that the movie had a rating and that the rating was PG-13? And each of the girls, about 6 girls I'm talking to, and each one of them said yes. But each girl told me it was their mom who took them to see the movie. And when I said, that's okay, but just think about the fact that someone somewhere who works for the rating company, right, thought that this movie was inappropriate for children under 13. What do you think about that? And they thought, and they said, we know exactly, each girl, I know exactly why it was not an appropriate movie for me. They talked about the violence. They talked about how much it scared them. But they were feeling peer pressure to see it. And the fact that their mother said yes affirmed for them that it was actually an okay thing to see. But some of them actually had lingering nightmares. Some of them were proud of themselves for going and yet really still upset. And even as I've conveyed this story over the years to other people, I've had adults say to me, "Oh, it's okay to take kids to scary movies. Like it's a rite of passage of kids. I went to movies that scared me when I was a kid." But think about what you're saying, right? We're talking about really negating how media makes us feel, having a very strong feeling about something. I don't like the way it makes me feel. It scares me. It upsets me. But the adults in my life are telling me I should see it anyway, so I guess I'll go. And you know, many of us, many loving parents are guilty of doing these things. And what I'm bringing up is really the struggle of having the right questions, the right thinking about how something makes us feel as a valid judgment for whether or not to consume a particular kind of media. That's intentional consumption. As a media literacy educator, I do not aim to tell you what to think about media. That is not my job. But I do want you to think about media. And the current 5 questions are just not enough. We need a group of questions better suited to the way we use media today. Questions that can prompt us to think about whether the media we are consuming is working for us or against us, and then changing our choices as needed intentionally. And that doesn't necessarily mean an overnight switch. When I talk to students in my media literacy class about what media makes them feel good and doesn't make them feel good, they will frequently talk about social media as something that does not make them feel good, but they feel that they can't fully disconnect. I get it. I understand that feeling of it not making you feel good, but not wanting to disconnect. So what's the baby step you can take? Could you ask yourself, you can make a rule for yourself, I'm not going to look at it in the last hour before I go to sleep at night. Or I'm not going to look at it until I've been awake for an hour. Or can I do that for 5 minutes? Can I push it aside for 5 minutes? Can I not have my phone out when I'm at a meal with my friend for 10 minutes? Like, what is the small thing that you can do to make your choices more intentional and to affirm that the way you feel about media is valid? Might someone ask these new meaningful questions and determine that polarizing, misleading, intolerance supporting content is what they prefer? Yeah, they might, right? There's no guarantee that just because you ask the right questions, that your answers are going to be what I want your answers to be. This is not about me. This is about you learning to ask and children learning to ask the questions. But time and again, when I talk with people, young and old, it's the lack of consideration to their choices, the lack of having a method to guide their thinking so that they can reflect on those choices. That's what leads to the negative choices. Frequently, it is not an intentional choice to consume something that is negative. It's just something they do, something they saw, something in their feed. So to be clear, everyone has a role in encouraging media to help us create a more positive world. The burden is not just on me or an audience member to ask more meaningful questions. The industry shares a responsibility, the government shares a responsibility, NGOs, educators, parents, we all have responsibility. But as an adult, we have the ultimate ability, because the greatest power media consumers have is the off switch. That's a quote from Dan Gilmore from Digital Disconnect. Thank you.